Hey, true crime fans! Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free true crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free true crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Welcome to Haunting History, the podcast that reaches back into the past for the events that still haunt us today. Tales of true crime, mystery, and the macabre. And when we're lucky, the stories where history and the people who lived it and the paranormal meet. Now, who doesn't love a good ghost story, right? Welcome back to Haunting History Podcast. I'm your host, Kat.
And I'm Carrie.
This story today has skipped my attention. I had no idea that the movie or the documentary were based on a quote-unquote true story. I didn't know. I mean, I've obviously seen the commercials for the haunting in Connecticut, but I didn't know that it was based on a true story. Did you?
Yeah.
I don't think I did. Not like Amityville. The Amityville house was such
You're
a
right.
big thing. And I always knew that was based on a true story. But I've never seen a haunting in Connecticut. And I didn't think about them being, I didn't compute that it was based on a true story.
Sure.
Or what one family claims is a true story.
Right.
In 1986, the Snedeker family found themselves at a crossroad. Carmen and Al Snedeker were parents to 3 children, including their eldest son, Philip, who had just been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which most people know is a rare and aggressive form of cancer. The family lived in upstate New York, but the frequent, grueling commutes to the University of Connecticut Health Center for his treatments were taking a toll on both their finances and their emotional well-being, which I can't imagine because, I mean, you want to be as close as possible to your child's medical team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Desperate to ease the burden, the Snedekers began searching for a home closer to the hospital. They needed something affordable, spacious enough for their family, and ideally located in a peaceful neighborhood where Philip could focus on his recovery. However, the financial strain of the Phillips' medical bills made their search particularly challenging. Their search led them to a large colonial-style house at 208 Meridian Avenue in Southington, Connecticut. The house, a 2-story structure with a basement, seemed almost too good to be true. Not only was the rent affordable, something Carmen later described as a godsend, but the house also had enough space for their entire family, and its closeness to the hospital was its final selling point, offering them the convenience that they so desperately needed. And sitting here right now with like just this part of the story, I would have done the same thing. Like
Yeah,
I
would
wouldn't
have too.
I mean, even if the house was falling down, as long as it was safe, if it was close to my children's medical team, I would have
slept in a car.
Right. However, the house came with a history that was less than ideal. And it's so funny because when they found out the history of the house, if it were me, I'm so macabre and goth that I would have been excited about it.
Yeah.
Like I would have been, this is really cool. It had been vacant for a long time, and Carmen was informed by the realtor that it had previously served as a funeral home. So again, being the macabre person that I am, I would have been excited.
Yeah.
She wasn't excited, but she thought it seemed more like an odd curiosity than a cause for concern. And she dismissed the notion, rationalizing that the house's past wasn't relevant to its future, which is very stoic of her. Do you know what I mean? That would be Haley.
Yeah.
Haley would be like, I don't really care. Where I would be excited. Carmen was more like how Haley would be like, yeah, I don't really care. It doesn't matter what it is now, you know?
Right.
And for her, all that mattered most was that it met their needs and provided a place for Philip during his treatments. But as they settled in, the Snedekers began to notice odd remnants of the house's former life. The basement, which they initially thought would be perfect for storage, contained a variety of mortuary tools. Again, I would be nerding out. It had gurneys, blood drains, toe tags, all relics of the previous use. There was also a mysterious room in the basement, which they later discovered had been the embalming room. The house carried a history that was as complex as it was unsettling. For several decades, 208 Meridian Avenue had operated as the Hallahan Funeral Home. Established in the early 20th century, the funeral home was a family-run business managed by the Hallahan family. The Hallahans lived on the upper floors of the house, while the ground floor and basement served as a funeral parlor and preparation areas. Okay, let me just specify one thing. I would have been excited about the fact that the house was old, that it had a history, that it was a funeral home. I mean, I hate even saying that because I probably sound like a crazy person, but I would have been like, yes. But I don't think I would have lived there during the time that it was a funeral home. Does that make sense?
Oh, no. Yeah. Me neither.
That's completely different, right?
It is, yeah.
The Hallahan Funeral Home was a cornerstone of the Southington community, providing funeral services for generations. Despite the somber nature of the business, the Hallahans were well respected and known for their compassion and professionalism. However, as time passed and newer, more modern funeral facilities emerged, the Hallahan Funeral Home saw a decline in business. In the early 80s, facing dwindling clientele, I guess that's a good thing, and the challenges of maintaining an aging property, the Hallahan family decided it was time to move on. They closed the funeral home, sold the property, and relocated to pursue other opportunities. The reasons cited for their departure were primarily economic, coupled with a desire for a fresh start away from the constant reminder of death that had been their livelihood. Yeah, I see that.
Mm-hmm.
After the Hallahans vacated the house at Meridian Avenue, it stood empty for a period. Records indicate that there were no long-term residents between the Hallahans and the Snedeker family. The property changed hands a couple of times, primarily among real estate investors who saw potential in converting the former funeral home into rental units. Now, I swear, nowadays you could probably open it as a bed and breakfast.
Probably.
An Airbnb. Minor renovations were undertaken to repurpose certain areas of the house, but many of the original features, such as the embalming room and the mortuary equipment, were left intact either out of neglect or an oversight. The period of vacancy contributed to the house's eerie aura. Local teenagers would often dare each other to approach the old funeral home, and whispers about unexplained lights and sounds began to circulate. All legends, and no one knows if anything unsettling really happened there. There was never an investigation or any first-hand experiences from anyone who spent time in the home. When the Snedeker family discovered the property, its affordability and proximity to the hospital overshadowed any of the reservations they might have had. Unaware of the full extent of the house's history and the potential implications, they signed the lease and moved in, setting the stage for a series of events that would blur the lines between reality and the supernatural. Not long after the Snedeker family moved into the house at 208 Meridian Avenue, the atmosphere in the new home began to shift in unsettling ways. The first to experience these changes was 14-year-old Philip, who was already grappling with the physical and emotional toll of cancer treatment. But what Philip encountered in the house would overshadow even his illness. Now, there are people that believe that, and I do too, because we always talk about like tragedies like are left in a house and all that other stuff, believe that someone who's undergoing such a traumatic experience has a different vibe to them, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
they would attract, or I don't know if it's, and I don't really know how to say it, maybe someone else would be better. Someone who's more of a paranormal investigator than I am would be able to say it better. But I can imagine that when you're that sick and your vibe is different because you're that sick, your whole body's, your composition, like everything's different, right? That maybe the veil between the living and the dead thins a little bit.
Yeah. It's probably like weaker.
Yeah, I would think that would contribute to it. So like the fact that he's sick. Okay, well, I'm just, you know what, I'm going to go on with the story, but I think that played into it is really all I'm going to say. Philip started to report seeing strange apparitions almost immediately after the family moved in. These were not fleeting glimpses, but vivid, terrifying visions of ghostly figures that seemed to be trapped between this world and the next. He described seeing shadowy figures with blurred faces, often standing at the foot of the bed or appearing in mirrors. But it wasn't just their appearance that disturbed him, it was what they said to him. The figures would whisper sinister messages to Philip, often in voices that were barely audible but deeply unsettling. These whispers filled his mind, creating a constant background noise that he couldn't escape. They told him that he was going to die, that his illness was a punishment, and that there was no hope for him. The voices would mock his suffering, taunting him with cruel words like, "You're already dead, and they're coming for you." How awful.
Yeah.
As time, I can't even imagine.
No. I mean, you're already sick and you're already struggling, and then that on top of it.
And then there are people like Haley who would say all these things were part of his illness, like his inability to sleep and
Yeah.
all that other stuff. As time went on, the whispers grew darker and more insistent. The entities began urging Philip to harm himself and others, saying things like, "End it now, and they won't miss you when you're gone." On more than one occasion, Philip claimed to hear the spirits command him to commit violent acts against his family, telling him, "Make them pay, or they deserve to suffer like you." These voices were relentless, filling his mind with thoughts that weren't his own, driving him to the brink of insanity. At first, Carmen and Al attributed Philip's experiences to the medication he was taking for his cancer treatment, obvi.
Mm-hmm.
The drugs he was on were known to cause hallucinations as a side effect, and the stress of his illness seemed a plausible explanation for his increasingly erratic behavior. However, Philip's experiences grew darker and more violent. He began to have sudden outbursts of anger and aggression, which were completely out of character for him, which, again, could be the medication.
Right.
On one occasion, he attacked his cousin, claiming he was under the control of an unseen force. Philip's mental state continued to deteriorate. He started to sleep in the basement despite its grim history as the former embalming room, saying that the spirits were less intense there. But even in the basement, he was not safe. He reported seeing visions of bodies laid out on mortuary slabs, and the air around him would often become ice cold, filled with a foul stench. These experiences became so intense that Philip eventually attempted to take his own life, convinced that death was the only way to escape the horrors that plagued him. As his condition worsened, the rest of the family began to experience their own encounters with the paranormal. Al, who had been skeptical at first, started to notice the smell of something rotting in certain parts of the house, particularly in the basement. The stench would come and go without explanation, often accompanied by a cold, oppressive feeling that made it difficult to breathe. Carmen, however, suffered the most after Philip. As a mother and primary caregiver, she was deeply attuned to the changes in her son, but she soon found herself under attack as well. Carmen began experiencing vivid nightmares in which she was visited by the same spirits that tormented Philip. These spirits would appear as disfigured, rotting corpses, and she would wake up feeling paralyzed, unable to move or speak, with the sensation of being suffocated. During the day,
terrifying.
Carmen noticed that objects... Well, and there's no like common sense validity for her because she's not on the medications, right?
Right.
I mean, although she was under massive amounts of stress, her son's personality was changing. He was sick. They had just moved. Like, there were other things in her life, but she wasn't on medications that would cause, obviously, hallucinations.
Right.
During the day, Carmen noticed that objects around the house would move on their own. Doors would slam shut, and the lights would flicker without apparent cause. On several occasions, she found herself drawn to the basement, as if something was compelling her to go there. Once she saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, its eyes fixed on her. But what truly terrified Carmen were the physical assaults she claimed to endure. She reported being touched and grabbed by unseen hands, often inappropriately, leading her to feel violated and afraid to be alone in the house. Her experiences reached a crescendo when she began seeing ghostly figures that appeared in broad daylight. She described one particularly terrifying encounter where she was cleaning the kitchen and suddenly felt an overwhelming presence behind her. When she turned around, she saw the faint outline of a man standing in the doorway watching her. He was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his face gaunt and expressionless. The figure vanished quickly as it appeared, but the fear it instilled lingered. The combination of these experiences led Carmen to an edge of a breakdown. She felt powerless to protect her family from the entities that seemed to have taken over their home. The spirits, she believed, were feeding off the negative energy in the house, particularly Philip's illness and the family's distress. Now, this, I believe, this is a part that, again, tragedy and all the other things,
Right.
it's a vibe and it's a negative energy.
Hey, Prime members, are you tired of ads interfering with your favorite podcasts? Good news! With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free podcasts. That's amazon.com/ad-free podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
The realization drove her to seek help, leading her to the involvement of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned paranormal investigators known for works on similar cases. Like you know who Ed and Lorraine are, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's funny because when you first started telling the story, I was like, they need to call. In my head, I was like, they need to call Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah. Well, and everything that they're involved in always has so much negative press.
Yeah.
Like if you believe in Ed and Lorraine, particularly Lorraine Warren, then you believe in her. If you don't, you can find everything wrong with her. Do you know what I mean? Like everything that they did was financially motivated.
Right.
Ed and Lorraine Warren concluded that more than a simple blessing was needed to rid the house of malevolent entities. They determined that a full exorcism was required, an intense and often dangerous ritual designed to expel demonic forces. This was not a decision they took lightly, as exorcisms are complex, requiring not only deep spiritual preparation, but also mental and physical fortitude. To perform the exorcism, the Warrens called up Father Francis M. McKenna, a Catholic priest who had extensive experience in dealing with cases of possession and hauntings. Father McKenna had worked with the Warrens on several previous cases and was known for his strong faith and dedication to helping those afflicted by supernatural forces. Joining them were a few select members of the New England Society for Psychic Research, including some seasoned paranormal investigators and a demonologist who had assisted in previous exorcisms. Now, I feel like the Warrens always call in a father to give them more credibility.
Sure.
But the fact that Catholic churches even have priests that can perform exorcisms for supernatural causes, and I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before, but I grew up in Orange, and there's a diocese in Orange, and I found out from someone that they actually have one of the only fathers that will perform exorcism is out of that diocese.
Oh, really?
In California, or at least in Southern California. And that always trips me out. Like just even walking by that church, I'm like, there's a dude here that does demonic exorcisms. It's crazy. Before the exorcism could begin, extensive preparations were necessary. The Warrens and Father McKenna spent hours in prayer, invoking protection and guidance from higher powers. The family was instructed to participate as well, with each member confessing their sins and praying for strength. Lorraine, using her clairvoyant abilities, tried to identify the specific locations within the house where the spirits were most active so that those areas could be targeted during the ritual. On the day that the exorcism was to begin, the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension. The family, already worn down by months of torment, huddled together in the living room, clutching rosaries and praying for the ordeal to be over. The Warrens, Father McKenna, and their team prepared for the ritual. They knew it would not be a quick or simple process. It would take several days to complete. The ritual itself involved multiple states, each day dedicated to different areas of the house and different aspects of the cleaning process. The Warrens and Father McKenna understood that such a deeply entrenched haunting required a thorough and methodical approach, and they knew that attempting to rush the exorcism could lead to failure or even provoke the spirits further, making them even more aggressive. The exorcism began with prayers, invoking the power of God to drive out demonic forces. Father McKenna moved methodically through the house, sprinkling holy water in each room, reciting the ritual Romanum, the official Catholic exorcism ritual. As he did, the air in the house seemed to grow heavier, and an unsettling coldness settled over the rooms. In some areas, particularly the basement, the temperature dropped sharply, and an overwhelming stench of decay filled the air. So that's what always freaks me out. I think smells freak me out more than anything.
Sure.
Because cold spots can always be arbitrary. I mean, you can...
Yeah. Kind of come up with an explanation.
Yeah. But smells, especially smells that come and go, and if everyone's smelling the same thing, I don't think that's as arbitrary. As the exorcism progressed, the activity in the house intensified. Doors began to slam shut on their own, and the walls seemed to vibrate. At one point, Lorraine reported seeing dark, shadowy figures moving along the walls, as if the spirits were trying to flee the purifying power of the ritual. The Snedeker family members later described feeling a mixture of fear and relief as they heard these disturbances, believing that the spirits were being driven out. Father McKenna focused much of his efforts on the basement where the spirits were believed to be the strongest. As he prayed, the oppressive energy in the room seemed to gather, swirling around him like a vortex. I mean, this was a movie in the making, right?
Yeah.
Lorraine, standing nearby, suddenly felt a sharp pain in her chest, as if something was trying to push her out of the room. Ed quickly moved to her side, helping her maintain composure as the ritual reached its peak. The climax of the exorcism came when Father McKenna commanded the spirits to leave the house and never return. He held up a crucifix, pressing it into the air, as if physically pushing the entities out of the space. The air in the room grew still for a moment, heavy with anticipation. Then, without warning, there was a loud crash from the basement, a sound so powerful that it reverberated throughout the entire house. It was as if the spirits were making one final attempt to assert their presence before being expelled. After the crash, the house felt eerily silent. The temperature in the basement began to rise back to normal, and the stench dissipated. Father McKenna continued his prayers, sealing the house against any further intrusions by the forces. When the exorcism was complete, the team gathered in the living room where the family waited anxiously. Father McKenna assured them that the spirits had been driven out and that their house was now cleansed. For the Snedeker family, the exorcism marked the beginning of an end to their nightmare. In the days and weeks that followed, the paranormal activity in the house ceased. Philip's mental state gradually improved, and the oppressive atmosphere that hung over the home for so long was finally lifted. The Warrens, along with Father McKenna, continued to check on the family, ensuring that the spirits had not returned. The exorcism of the Snedeker home was one of the most intense and challenging cases the Warrens had ever encountered. It also became one of the most controversial, as skeptics questioned the legitimacy of the events and the methods used. However, for the Snedeker family, there is no doubt that something dark and evil had inhabited their home, and that had taken the combined efforts of the Warrens, Father McKenna, and their faith to banish it. After the exorcism, the atmosphere in the Snedeker home changed dramatically. The oppressive presence that had once permeated the house was gone, and the sense of dread that had weighed on the family lifted. For the first time in months, the Snedekers were able to sleep through the night without fear of being tormented by unseen forces. The once unbearable stench of decay that had lingered in the basement vanished and was replaced by almost an eerie calm. The family's relief was noticeable, but the emotional and physical scars from the ordeal remained. Philip, whose mental and physical health had been deeply affected by the haunting, slowly began to recover. His violent outbursts subsided, and the disturbing visions and whispers that had plagued him receded. However, the experience left a lasting impact on him and the rest of the family. They had endured months of torment in a house that should have been their refuge, and the trauma was something that they would carry with them for the years to come. Despite the cleansing of the house, the Snedekers decided they could no longer stay in a place that held so many painful memories. The home, once seen as a sanctuary close to the hospital, had become a symbol of their darkest fears. They chose to move out not long after the exorcism was completed, seeking a fresh start away from the nightmare they had lived through. I don't know. I mean, I think I would have moved before it, not after.
Right. Yeah, what's the point?
I mean, they had it cleaned and they felt better, and then they're going to move. Once the Snedekers vacated the property, the house at 208 Meridian Avenue returned to the rental market. Given the history of the house, including its formal use as a funeral home and a widely publicized haunting, one might have expected it to remain vacant for some time. However, the house was soon rented out again, this time to a series of tenants who were either unaware or unconcerned about its past. Okay, first of all, you were not unaware.
No.
This was super publicized.
Right.
They were either into it or unconcerned. One or the other. There's no unaware. Interestingly, the tenants who moved in after the Snedekers did not report any significant paranormal activity, a stark contrast to the intense haunting experience by their family. Some speculated that the exorcism had been successful in driving out the malevolent spirits for good. Others wondered if the spirits had been uniquely drawn to the Snedeker family due to the combination of Philip's illness and the house's dark history. The house continued to change hands over the years with new tenants moving in and out. While some residents claimed to feel an odd presence or occasional unexplained phenomena, none reported anything close to the level of terror experienced by the Snedekers. The house eventually faded from public view, becoming just another rental property in a quiet Connecticut neighborhood. However, the story of the haunting and the exorcism performed by the Warrens remains part of the house's legacy. The case was immortalized in the book In a Dark Place, The Story of a True Haunting, co-written by Ed and Lorraine Warren and author Ray Garton. The story served as the inspiration for the 2009 film The Haunting in Connecticut, which dramatized the Snedekers family experiences, bringing their story to a wider audience. After enduring the terrifying experiences at the house in Connecticut, the Snedeker family sought to move on with their lives. The haunting had left deep emotional scars, and the family members each dealt with the aftermath in their own ways. Today, the Snedeker family leads more private lives, having largely stepped out of the public eye. However, here's what is known about their lives after the events at 208 Meridian Avenue. Philip Snedeker, the eldest son, who was at the center of much of the paranormal activity, continued to face significant challenges after leaving the haunted house. While he did recover from his battle with cancer, the psychological impact of the haunting stayed with him for many years. Philip largely kept out of the spotlight in the years following the events, focusing on his personal life and trying to rebuild after the traumatic experiences. Unfortunately, Philip passed away in 2012 after a long battle with cancer, actually unrelated to the Hodgkin's lymphoma he had as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
The interesting thing, this is the interesting part of the story. Well, this is, to me, interesting. Carmen Snedeker, the family matriarch, has remained the most vocal about their experiences in the years following the haunting. She gave numerous interviews and participated in documentaries about the case, often defending the authenticity of their story against skeptics. Carmen has expressed mixed feelings about the film The Haunting in Connecticut, acknowledging that while it brought their story to a wider audience, it also sensationalized certain aspects of it, which she felt undermined the reality of their ordeal. The couple eventually divorced in the mid-90s, several years after they had moved out of the house. The reasons for their divorce were multifaceted, but the lingering effects of the haunting and the trauma they both experienced and the stress of trying to maintain a sense of normalcy in the aftermath contributed significantly to their divorce. Carmen has spoken out about how the haunting and its aftermath created a rift in their relationship, as each of them coped with the trauma in different ways. The intense scrutiny and the public nature of their experiences also added pressure to their marriage. Carmen eventually remarried and took the name Carmen Reed. She took a significant step that would define the next chapter of her life. She decided to work in the paranormal field herself. The decision was driven by a combination of personal conviction, a desire to help others, and the profound impact the haunting had on her life. After the exorcism and the family's move from the haunted house, Carmen found herself struggling to process everything that she had experienced. The events in Southington had shattered her understanding of the world, leaving her with questions about the nature of good and evil, the afterlife, and the spiritual realm. Despite the trauma, Carmen felt a deep need to understand what had happened and to use that understanding to help others who might be facing similar situations. Her journey into the paranormal field began gradually. She started researching the phenomenon of hauntings and paranormal activity, trying to find explanations for the terrifying experience her family had endured. She also began connecting with others who had gone through similar experiences, finding a sense of community and support among those who had faced the unknown. Her involvement deepened when she collaborated with other paranormal investigators. Through these connections, she found that her firsthand experiences gave her unique perspective and credibility in the field. She was not just a witness to the paranormal, she was a survival of one of the most intense hauntings on record. This made her a valuable resource for those seeking to understand and confront similar situations. Motivated by the desire to help others to avoid the pain and fear that her family had experienced, she began participating in paranormal investigations. She worked with various teams, offering her insight and experiences to guide investigations and help families dealing with it. Carmen's goal was not just to prove the existence of the paranormal, but to provide comfort and solutions by those tormented by the natural forces. Over time, Carmen's work in the paranormal field expanded. She appeared on various paranormal-themed television shows and documentaries, sharing her story and advocating for greater understanding of the paranormal field. Carmen also became involved in helping families who believed they were experiencing hauntings, using her knowledge and experience to assist in identifying and addressing paranormal activity in their homes. Her transition into the paranormal field was as much about healing as it was about helping others. By confronting the terrifying experiences of her past and turning them into a force for good, she found a way to reclaim control over the part of her life that had been once dominated by fear. For Carmen, working in the paranormal field was a way to make sense of the inexplicable and to ensure that her family's suffering had not been in vain. Today, Carmen Reed, formerly Carmen Snedeker, continues to be active in the paranormal community. She remains committed to helping others and raising awareness about the realities of the paranormal, drawing on her own experience. The other Snedeker children have, for the most part, stayed out of the public eye. They have pursued their own lives away from the media spotlight, preferring to keep their private experiences private. The haunting and its aftermath were undoubtedly difficult for them, and they've chosen to move forward without dwelling in the past. Al Snedeker, the father, also maintained a low profile following the events at the Southington home. He supported his family through the ordeal, but did not seek the same level of public attention as Carmen. Al's focus was on providing a stable environment for his family after the events they had endured. He passed away a few years after they left the house, but not much more is publicly known about his later years. In summary, the Snedeker family, after leaving the house at 208 Meridian Avenue, worked to rebuild their lives and move beyond the haunting that had once consumed them. While some members of the family, like Carmen, have remained connected to the paranormal community, others have chosen a path of privacy and healing away from the public eye. The legacy of their experience, however, continues to resonate with those experienced in the supernatural and serves as a reminder of the lasting impact that such events can have on a family. Today, 208 Meridian Avenue still stands as a seemingly ordinary house with an extraordinary past. Its walls have witnessed both life and death, despair and hope, fear and faith. While the house may no longer be the site of active hauntings, it's a story that continues to intrigue and unsettle those who hear it. As for the Snedeker family, the house will always be a reminder of the unseen forces that once turned their lives upside down. What is your thought? What is your thoughts?
Well, like the aftermath thought, it's nice that like she took her experience and is trying to help others in that sense. But like I get both sides of the family, like the ones that are like, no, I want nothing to do with it. Keep me out of the public. But I also get her side.
Right. Well, that she went on and did other things. What about the fact that do
Yeah.
you think it was real though?
I don't know. Because I would think, I don't know. It's so hard because it's like there's all these people that are saying it happened and that they did that. Like there's witnesses essentially, but yet nobody else has ever had anything happen to them since.
Right.
Yeah, it could have also been more so just because of like Philip is who mainly caused it to happen, and then when he's gone, and between him being gone and the exorcism, they had no reason to come back.
Yeah. I mean, you also have to consider the fact that there is a financial side of this, the Warrens'
Right.
publicity, and Carmen, I couldn't find any information. I mean, it was different back in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s that there weren't a lot of paranormal shows out there. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I guarantee that there was financial compensation for Carmen to be on talk shows.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's so not clear cut whether the whole story was real or amplified or even created for financial gain. There's no way to know.
I would totally believe that things did happen in the house just based off of the history, but most likely wasn't as dramatic as they stated.
So you think the possibility is that parts of it are true? They really had some kind of experience, but it was may have been blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
See, I think that too, except that I always think like, why does the Catholic Church have someone whose job it is to rid places and people of demonic possession? Like there's actually someone who does have. So like it has to, no, I shouldn't say has. So there's an existence out there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just that maybe because of our tiny worldview, we don't have experience with it, and we don't. Like, I guess I'm more of a person who believes in, maybe this is self-preservation. I'm more of a person who believes in haunted houses and ghost stories. And I'm very skeptical. I know no one ever believes that I'm skeptical, but I am. That they're residual. They're more residual than intelligent hauntings or demonic hauntings.
Yeah, like I would agree with that.
And maybe it's easier and it's a self-preservation thing that I don't think any deeper into it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I would feel like if that kind of stuff was actually happening, we would be hearing about it more. You know what I mean? Like if somebody was... I mean,
it's more accepted now for sure, right?
Yeah.
Because you think people might keep those things secret too, right?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the story of this family in their haunted house in Connecticut raises intriguing questions about the nature of reality, perception, and fear. Sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that blur the lines between fact and fiction. The truth may be elusive, but the fear is very real. Thank you for listening to this episode of Haunting History Podcast. We love hearing from you, so be sure to like, follow, and comment on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Haunting History Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to all your favorites.
Visit our website at hauntinghistorypodcast.com for more information on each episode, links to our Patreon page, and all of our social media platforms.
Until next time, I'm Kat.
I'm Haley.
Remember, the living are far scarier than any ghost.